You know, one of the things that we get, what we hear from members a lot is about understanding what the board of directors do. What is it that we do in that room? What is it that we do when we get together? So hopefully these videos or little snippets that we can provide will give them some insight into those discussions that we have at the board. Well, the Benevolent Fund is something like a few other topics that comes up quite a bit from members. So the Benevolent Fund has to do with members that will suffer from a critical illness, and what types of benefits could the board provide, if at all. So right now what the board is doing is going through the research phase of trying to understand other models that are out there. What is the cost of those models, and what's the benefit? And so how do we balance that and making sure that we come up with something that's reasonable in looking at that decision, whether or not we would do it or not. Korea's Futures Project is really something that's changing all of organized real estate, and it's dealing in four main areas of consumer insight, it's dealing with professional development, member services. Now we're at the implementation team stage. So a select group of people that Korea selected by nomination and by application have now come forward to implement some of these changes and look at how do we create the best teams possible to start moving forward and implementing change. So it's an exciting time. We'll see how that turns out. Partnering with other boards is actually a big conversation at the board of directors right now, because we've got three significant projects that are happening in the province. The CRM, which is the Customer Relationship Management Project. Then we have Transformative Education, which is looking at learning paths and how does education move forward into the long term. And then the third one, of course, is our single MLS system. And so when we look at strategies on how to partner with other boards, are we going to be all-inclusive? Do we create systems where every board participates all at the same time? Do we look at systems where 2 or 3 boards would come together, start an idea, create a resource and a business model, and other boards would join later? Conversations have been had that the provincial entity should start the project and attach boards to it and move forward on a provincial scope. So there's a number of factors that we have to consider and risks that we have to consider in terms of the rate of innovation, making sure we're inclusive of everyone, and then of course the value creation and risk conversation that's happening with that specific project. The governance committee basically takes information that the board has decided on and looks at better ways to make decisions. So one of the things that the governance committee right now is looking at is better learning paths for directors. How do we go out and get better education for directors, events, and conferences that will allow them to make better decisions at our board? That's one aspect. The other thing that the governance committee is looking at is, of course, the aftermath of the AGM and the governance review process for our board of directors and whether or not we'll be taking that forward. Risk management is really a balance of there's value creation and what's the risk associated with that value creation. So when we had the conversation about risk management, we looked specifically at IT. Are we right now looking at the most reliable technologies? Do we have the best tools? Do we really want to be at the cutting edge where those tools might fail because they haven't been fully developed? Mac compatibility is something that we hear a lot from members. And when we're talking about Mac compatible, we're not talking about platform Mac, we're talking about also iPad compatible, and that is actually different. So when we're looking at those types of technologies, do we go with a trusted, sure, high reliability supplier that is also not Mac compatible versus going with something that is perhaps newer, might have some downtime, and also has higher risk? At the very least, in the next level of our Fusion ML Exchange solution, it will be Mac compatible on the desktop version, but we still won't have as good Mac compatibility on the iPad and the mobile devices.